Ladies and gentlemen, and all those watching on YouTube, you know our next guest as the intrepid reporter and relentless questioner at White House press briefings. He's now at CNN, where he serves as chief Washington correspondent and host of The Lead. He's also author of The Outpost, an untold story of American Valor, which is now available in paperback. He'll discuss tonight. Foreign Policy magazine calls it the best book set in Afghanistan to date. Ladies and gentlemen, Jake Tapper.
Thank you. That's the 10th Mountain song. There's a scene at the beginning of the book where the 10th Mountain is instructing a young aviation intelligence officer to set up a location for a base that he thinks is off base, to say the least, and that's the reason for that music. I have to say, as a former White House correspondent, it is really trippy being in this room. This is where the press conferences would take place, the serious ones, the serious planned press conferences. This is where the events that we cover, I mean, it is really an uncanny recreation of the room. And it's playing with my head. Even more so than the times I've visited at the Reagan Library. They have an Oval Office recreation, and then a friend of mine created Scandal on ABC, and I visited her set. And they have an Oval Office there, but this really is very, very, very well done. So kudos to whoever came up with that. It's an honor to be here, especially on the centennial year, the 100th anniversary of President Nixon's birth. And I want to thank the Nixon Foundation for having me out here. It's great timing that I'm speaking on Veterans Day, because this book, in no small part, was written to honor veterans and to help try to understand what it is they go through and to explain it to people in the same way that I came to need it explained to me. On Veterans Day in 1972, Richard Nixon said of veterans, "In serving God and country, they have sought not glory for themselves, but peace and freedom for us all." Not glory for themselves. And that is an interesting thing to think of when we are just a few miles away from Hollywood, where people seek glory for all sorts of reasons. I've been thinking a lot about glory this weekend. A lot of veteran friends of mine, if you'll permit me just a quick digression, a lot of veteran friends of mine were upset about comments attributed to Tom Cruise that were it turns out of context, in which he supposedly, although it wasn't actually the case, compared how difficult it is to make a movie with how difficult it is to be a soldier in Afghanistan, and they were very upset. And then I tracked down the full context of what he said, and it wasn't anything like that, really. But there was this period of real outrage where all these people on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and everywhere were furious at Tom Cruise for these comments that he never actually made. And after I understood what he had actually said, I wonder what could have been done with all that energy that was spent getting angry at Tom Cruise for a comment he never made. I wonder what society could have done with that. Nixon, in his memoirs, recalled going to a Pentagon briefing during the Vietnam War, and on his way out, he was, I'll just read this, surrounded by a friendly, cheering crowd. One woman was particularly emotional as she thanked me on behalf of her husband, who was serving in Vietnam. As I thought of these men and women with loved ones fighting in Vietnam, I could not help thinking about those students who took advantage of their draft deferments and their privileged status in our society to bomb campuses, set fires, and tyrannize their institutions. I have seen them, I said about our soldiers in Vietnam. They're the greatest. You see these bums, blowing up the campuses. Then out there we have kids who are just doing their duty, and I have seen them. They stand tall and they are proud. We've come a long way since that time. And when we think of our troops, we don't necessarily think of the kind of protests that were going on back then. But there are two worlds, even more so today, without a draft. And don't misunderstand me, I'm not calling for one. But the reason I'm here and the reason I'm talking about Afghanistan when I have not served one day in uniform is because I had something of an awakening about what it is that this 1% goes through for the rest of us, for the 99%. It started on October 3rd, 2009. My son, Jack, was born on October 2nd, 2009. I was in the hospital recovery room with my wife in Washington, D.C., and spending time with her, spending time with the baby, watching CNN on the TV. I'm a news junkie, and I just can't help it. And just to give you an idea of what a news junkie I am, the day that a certain senator from the West was discovered having had a toe-tapping incident in the Minneapolis airport men's bathroom, that was my daughter's birthday. That was the day my daughter was born, August 27th, 2007. I did not write a book about that. But the day after my son Jack was born, October 3rd, 2009, was the day that Combat Outpost Keating was attacked. And that really resonated with me, and I can't really explain it except to say that I was holding my son, my newborn son, my only son, and watching TV and hearing about 8 other sons, not that much older than Jack, who were taken from this earth. And there was something in that moment, when your life changes, you rarely realize it at the time. It's only in retrospect that you realize, oh, that's the moment I fell out of love with her, or whatever. This was the moment that my eyes started opening. And there was something about the story and the moment where I just needed to know more about Combat Outpost Keating, a camp I'd never heard of. And the way the media covered it accurately was, why would anybody put a camp here? And it was a really good question. The camp was put at the bottom of 3 steep mountains, just 14 miles from the Pakistan border. And that morning, October 3rd, 2009, at the crack of dawn, 53 U.S. troops were attacked by up to 400 insurgents. And the insurgents all had the high ground. I'm no expert on military matters, but I know that the high ground is what you want to have, and the low ground is what you don't want to have. And that day produced the deadliest day for the U.S. in Afghanistan, and was one of the most difficult battles fought in that war that is still going on. We still have more than 40,000 troops there. So I wanted to know more, and I waited to learn more. But I never heard why. It was never explained to me, and I would Google Combat Outpost Keating, and I would try to find out what happened. And eventually the Army came out with their report, their investigation, but as Army investigations go, it was fairly limited in scope, explaining what had happened the couple months leading up to the attack and what happened that day. But there was really no explanation about, well, why were they there? Why were they in that incredibly indefensible, vulnerable location? So eventually I started making phone calls. I'm nosy, that's why I'm a reporter. I want to know things. And the troops from 361 Cav got home in May or June 2010, depending on the soldier, and they wanted to talk. Yeah, they were suspicious of the Washington, D.C. journalist, but they wanted to talk. Some of them asked me why I wanted to know about the battle, why I was interested in it. And it was a good question, because I had covered war before. I had done a few weeks in the Baghdad Bureau for ABC News, and I'd covered Afghanistan as the senior White House correspondent for ABC News. So I'd covered Afghanistan from the north lawn of the White House. But I'd covered Afghanistan the way that White House correspondents cover Afghanistan, or the way that I shouldn't put it off on everybody. My coverage was lacking. I covered the troop debates. Obama was going to surge troops in Afghanistan. How many was it going to be? Was it going to be 5,000? Was it going to be 10,000? Was it going to be 40,000? Like I was talking about the Dow or the score of the Eagles game. And, sorry, I'm a Philadelphia fan. I covered the politics of Afghanistan. I covered the debate going on inside the White House. President Obama had an AFPAC review going on, Afghanistan, Pakistan, what were we going to do? And Vice President Biden wanted to do counterterrorism, which is a smaller, limited force focusing on just taking out the bad guys. And General McChrystal wanted to do counterinsurgency, which is bigger and involves winning over hearts and minds, bringing in projects and development and aid so that the townspeople will realize that this way is the right path and that's the wrong path, and they will be bonded with the Afghanistan government. So I was covering that, but I wasn't covering the troops, the people who were actually doing what we sent them to do, what we sent them to do in 2001. And so the soldiers started talking to me, and it was just an incredible story for any number of reasons. I think I was most struck by the fact that of the 8 guys who died, and almost all of the ones who survived, they were all killed trying to do something for their fellow soldiers. Every one of them. And most of the ones who survived also spent their day doing that as well. Whether it was Vernon Martin, the mechanic, who was running ammunition to these guys in a Humvee, or Sergeant Joshua Kirk firing up into the hills to try to kill the enemy, or the first one killed in the battle, Private Kevin Thompson, who was in the mortar pit, and he ran out to his gun as soon as the battle started, and he was shot in the head. Every one of them was trying to do something to save their fellow troops. And so I signed a book contract to write about this battle. And then something really extraordinary happened, which was other soldiers who had served at Combat Outpost Keating in previous years, the camp was started in 2006, started reaching out to me because they wanted me to tell their stories too, their fallen comrades, their fallen commanders. I first heard from a young intelligence officer named Ross Burkhoff, who wanted me to know who Ben Keating was. That's the guy the camp was named after. And he wanted me to write about his commander, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Fenty, who had just had his first child 3 weeks before he was killed in a helicopter crash. And he wanted to explain why the camp was put there, what they were doing, why they thought that was a good location or the least worst option in that part of the country. And then I heard from a guy named Lieutenant David Roller, who was in the group that came next, part of the 191 CAV. And they had had a really successful year in Afghanistan, 2007 to 2008. They had bonded with the local population. They thought they were winning them over. And Dave also wanted me to write about his commander, Tom Bostic, Captain Tom Bostic, who was killed fighting over there, and Ryan Fritchie and Chris Pfeiffer and others who didn't make it back. And then I heard from the guys who served from 08 to 09 with the 6-4, and they really wanted to talk about their commander, Rob Yeskis, who was an amazing guy and who was also killed by insurgents while serving there. And pretty soon, I had a much bigger project on my hands than I had wanted to, but I was infused with their desire to have all these stories told, or as many as they could. because they feel like they are forgotten. They feel like no one's paying attention. They feel like they go over there and they do this, and they lose friends, and they're away from their loved ones, and they live in terror, and they'll never be the same. And all we're paying attention to back here is Kim Kardashian. Or something that Tom Cruise may or may not have said. And I came home from meeting Dave Roller. You can tell their stories. So that's what I started to do, and thank God for my wife, because she understood what a mission it became for me to tell these stories about who these people are and why they do what they do. And we shouldn't pretend that every single person that goes into the Army does so because he wants to kill Al-Qaeda and defend the nation. A lot of them do. A lot of them come from a lifetime of service. Some of them wake up at 19 and realize that if they don't join the Army, they're probably going to end up in jail or dead before they're 25. And what I thought I wanted to do was make sure everybody understood with an unblemished eye. In the book, I hope, is a real person. They're all none of them are flawless. Fight. Recognize, and it's a recognition that needs to come with an acceptance that they are not all Audie Murphy. Audie Murphy wasn't Audie Murphy. The things that I learned while writing the book were ones that I suppose I should have known, having covered Afghanistan, but ones that just didn't occur to me, such as the fact that Lieutenant Colonel Fenty was killed in a helicopter crash, and there wasn't one insurgent involved. The helicopter hit a tree, part of it. It got pitched up, and then it crashed, and 10 Americans were killed. You can't really find anything about that helicopter crash, not much written about it in the media, but 10 Americans were killed that day. Finding out that the terrain in Afghanistan is often just as deadly as the enemy was an eye-opener for me. First Lieutenant Ben Keating was killed driving a light medium truck on the roads outside the camp that would come to bear his name. And the road gave way, and he tumbled down. And he died. He was killed. Another eye-opener was just what it is that military wives and military children, their everyday experience in just existing in the United States, which has been at war since October 2001. Rob Yeskis was not initially killed, he was severely wounded. And when he came home, or when he went to Walter Reed rather, his little girl, Eva, asked her mom, Dina, how Daddy was, because she knew something was wrong with him. And Dina said that he was really hurt, and that he was going to lose his legs. And Eva already knew what that meant, because she already had a family friend who had prostheses, a friend of Rob's from his previous deployment in Iraq. And so Eva said, well, that's okay, because I can paint Dad's legs peach, and they'll look like legs. And Dina did everything she could to not cry at the innocence of a little girl who was, at 6 years old, already trying to figure out a way to make it work. The other thing that my eyes became open to has to do with something that we as a society are going to have to really face up to. And that is the fact that we have 2.5 million troops who served in Iraq or Afghanistan. And according to just conservative estimates, 500,000 of them have psychological wounds, PTS or other trauma, that we've got to make sure we provide the care for, and we've also got to make sure we do not stigmatize them and deny them work and deny them employment because we fear that they're going to snap. And that's going to be a very difficult line for this nation to cross and to negotiate, to figure out. There was a guy who served at Combat Outpost Keating that day named Eric Harder. Eric Harder was the first one I talked to when I started writing the book. Eric Harder told me that they used to sit around in this fishbowl and think about couldn't fire up into the mountains. Then they went for all the guard posts. Then they went for the operations center. They knew what they were doing. Soldiers who have served in both Iraq and Afghanistan will tell you that they have a grudging respect for the fighters of Afghanistan. They're fighters. This trained for centuries. They were in this province called Nuristan. If you've ever seen the movie with Sean Connery and Michael Caine, or read the novella by Rudyard Kipling called The Man Who Would Be King, you might be a little familiar with Nuristan. It's the Afghanistan of Afghanistan. It is one of the most fierce, remote parts of that country. They are their own distinct ethnic group. They were the last ones to convert to Islam, only at the end of the 19th century. And they were the first ones to take up arms against the Soviets. They do not like outsiders. Right outside Combat Outpost Keating were the hollowed out shells of 2 or 3 Soviet personnel carriers. Another reminder for soldiers that maybe this wasn't the best place to set up a camp. Other empires had been there before, and they hadn't fared so well. There was a guy in Bulldog Troop 361 Cav, at Black Knight Troop 361 Cav, who, his name was Ed Faulkner Jr. Ed Faulkner taught me something else. Ed Faulkner was one of these guys who kind of just ended up in the military. And he'd maybe smoked a little pot in high school. He went to Iraq, and he got wounded, and he developed a real problem with painkillers. And then he came back to the States, and he might have developed some other problems too, other chemical problems. One of his best friends overdosed before deployment in 2009, leaving behind a wife and a little kid, little baby. Ed Faulkner went to Afghanistan, and on that day performed more heroically than I know I would be able to. There were 5 guys stuck in a Humvee, and Ed Faulkner and 2 other guys got in a truck and went to save them. When I say they were stuck in a Humvee, I don't mean the doors didn't open. I mean they couldn't open the doors because there were so many bullets coming their way, so many RPGs and rockets and mortars. And so they drove a truck to them to try to distract the Taliban. The mission didn't work, and of the 3 guys who went on that truck, Josh Hart and Chris Griffin and Ed Faulkner Jr. was the only one who made it back. Ed Faulkner was upset because the scar he had, the really horrible wound he had, was in his Iraq War wound. So he would say, I'm going to have 2 Purple Hearts and only 1 scar. No one's going to believe me. Ed came back to Fort Carson, Colorado, and he probably started developing his drug problem again. This time haunted not just by pain, but also by ghosts. As soon as Faulkner got back to Burlington, North Carolina, he retreated into his own head, keeping in touch with friends mainly through his Facebook page. Faulkner was haunted. He dreamt about Iraqis coming to his family's door, ringing the doorbell, bringing him their dead babies. He lamented to his father that he could have done something to save Chris Griffin's life as they ran from the truck. When the sun was in the sky, Ed would have flashbacks. When the moon was out, he was constantly being scared awake by nightmares. Michael Scusa, his friend, had once comforted Faulkner by saying, "It's all good, man, it's all good." But Scusa was gone. He wasn't able to say that anymore. The outpost never left Ed Faulkner. He'd stay up late at night watching insurgents' videos on YouTube. He told a friend from 361 Cav, Brian Casey, that he heard gunfire and saw Taliban on a daily basis. His father took him to a Greensboro Grasshoppers minor league baseball game. And Ed Faulkner hit the ground as if he were under attack. Once in the middle of the night, Faulkner's mother, Sharon, couldn't find her son. He wasn't in his bed, but his truck was still in the driveway. He didn't answer his cell phone. She got in her car and drove around the neighborhood looking for him. He wasn't anywhere. When she returned, as she pulled into the driveway, she saw a shadow in the bushes in front of the house. She walked over and found her son crouched down, acting as if he had a rifle and were looking through its scope at an enemy across the street. He picked up an invisible radio and started talking into it, as if he was in combat. Faulkner's mother guided him to his bed. The next morning, he remembered none of it. At the end of July 2010, Ed Faulkner Jr. ran naked into the street, yelling that the end of the world was coming. He asked drivers if they'd been saved by Jesus Christ. The officer didn't want to his room with its mattress thrown to the floor and its occupant covered from head to toe by a sheet. The room clearly belonged to someone else, someone unhinged, she thought. Whoever that is, bless his heart, she said to herself before realizing it was her brother. She walked in and tried to make conversation, but it didn't sound like his voice when he spoke. Something had taken him over. He scared her. "I can't sit in this nut house," he told her. The realization took the wind out of her. She tried to tell him to give his life over to God, that only he, not drugs, could save him, but her brother seemed beyond saving. "There's all this noise in my mind," he told her. "It won't stop. It won't quiet down." Faulkner was transferred to a local veterans hospital for a couple days, assigned a social worker, and then discharged. His parents were not impressed by the quality of care their son received, which seemed casual, when clearly he needed serious help. "If you're out in a storm, you seek shelter," Ed Sr. would later say. He had a storm going on in his brain, but his government, his country, provided his son with no such cover. Faulkner met a woman named Charlene in August 2010. She told him she was bipolar. She suffered from manic depression. For the first time in a long while, Faulkner didn't feel alone. Charlene knew how he felt. He moved into her two-bedroom apartment within weeks of meeting her. On the night of September 15, 2010, Charlene found Ed Faulkner drifting off to sleep in his parked truck. When she asked him what was wrong, he didn't answer. She helped him stumble out of the vehicle and into her bed. The next morning, Charlene woke up and got her daughter ready for school. She took her to the bus stop. When she came back, she was surprised to see that Faulkner had not moved an inch. She realized he wasn't breathing. She called 911, tried to revive him. The fire department arrived and took over the CPR. The police and ambulance got there at the same time. The emergency medical technicians, firefighters, worker called Ed Faulkner Sr. "Would you please let your son know he's late for his appointment?" he asked. Ty Carter was a guy who served with Ed Faulkner and was a friend of his. Ty Carter was awarded the Medal of Honor in August. There are 2 living service members who were awarded the Medal of Honor for their activities at Combat Outpost Keating. That's the first time since 1968 that 2 living American service were awarded. The time before that, the 2 were awarded the Medal of Honor for the same battle was Black Hawk Down, exactly to the day, October 3rd, 1993. But both of those were posthumous. Ty Carter is one of the bravest guys I know. Ty Carter is very open and honest about his battles right now with post-traumatic stress. He's still in the Army. He's still an incredible, he contributes a lot. He made sure that Ed Faulkner's parents were at his Medal of Honor ceremony. And President Obama, he knows how much it meant to the Faulkners, mentioned Ed, who they felt had been ignored by the Army, kicked out. The Army thought they were doing Ed a favor by discharging him honorably, even if he needed help, as opposed to letting him stick around and then being dishonorably discharged. But President Obama mentioned Ed Faulkner and his struggle, and that meant a lot to the Faulkners. How many Faulkners are we going to have over the next 50 years? Heard of Ed Faulkner Jr. overdosing. Carter said, 9th victim. A lot of them now, a lot of them on Facebook, which is where I'm sure the military does more communication than any other communication system that we're spending billions of dollars for. And a lot of these people are in real pain. Soldiers and moms, widows. My eyes were opened 4 years ago when I saw this battle, or they started to become open that day. And that's why I wrote the book, and that's why I try to understand what it is that these men and women go through and continue to go through. I wish I've done now, I did 2 documentaries about Combat Outpost Keating at CNN. And I was really glad I'm at CNN because I could do an hour-long documentary about a Medal of Honor battle, which network television won't do. And an hour-long documentary about him or her. I wish I could tell you that. I don't know what we as a society need to do in order to become more connected to what these people are doing for us. I'm not a policymaker, I'm just a reporter. But I'll tell you something. I'm willing to listen to anything anybody has to say about how it can be that we're not so disconnected, that people feel like they have skin in the game. One the current status of our armed services, because he thought that it was like we were almost at the point where it's like Roman legionnaires, where we just like have this force that we hire and they're not connected to us at all and nobody pays much attention to it. And on this Veterans Day, I just would leave you, and then I'm happy to take any questions you have. I'll leave you with the thought. What can we do besides just saying thank you for your service? Counting how important people feel good about themselves in the airport and then they walk away and run to Chili's. But what can we do? Like I said, I'm not a policymaker, I'm a reporter, but I can tell you that I don't think it's sustainable, what we're doing. I don't think it's sustainable that that this 1% bears 100% of the pain. It doesn't make any sense to me.
More and more of what you're doing right now.
More of what I'm doing right now. I know that anytime somebody from Washington, D.C., especially somebody in the lamestream media, speaks, there's always a lot of questions, and I'm very, very happy to entertain any of them and answer all of them. But I hope you give the book a shot. I poured my heart and soul into it and tried to tell stories of people who should have their names recognized more than Kardashian and Cruz. We should know the names Clinton Romachet and Justin Gallegos and Ed Faulkner Jr. and Stephen Mace and Vernon Martin and Josh Hart and Josh Kirk and Kevin Thompson and Chris Pfeiffer and Joe Fenty and Brian Moquin. These are names we should know. And I'm sorry that it took me so long to realize that. Thanks.
Mr. Tapper, thank you. We'll take some questions from the audience.
You've been calling me Jake all day, but now I'm Mr. Tapper.
Our first question will be from Councilman Hernandez.
Thank you, Councilman.
Mr. Tapper, our
I'm
country's
Jake.
been-
Please call me Jake.
Jake, that's my grandson's name too,
Okay.
by the way. Jake, we've been through a lot of conflicts over the founding of our country. How have we treated our wounded warriors or returning warriors any different through the course of all those conflicts than we do now? Have we done anything different?
Absolutely. And it's better than it's ever been. I think it's fair to say. In terms of awareness, I'm reminded of a quote from Elie Wiesel that the opposite of love is not hate, the opposite of love is indifference. And I feel like there's still too much indifference. There are 900,000 soldiers on food stamps. 900,000. And when they, whether you want to call it a food stamp cut or they reduce the previous increase, whatever, I don't want to get into a semantic fight. When they cut food stamps a few weeks ago, that hit 900,000 veterans. So we're doing better, but we're not doing as well as we need to be doing, I think.
Our next question right here.
Hi, Jake. I think part of it is we don't teach kids patriotism anymore in history in school. It's just kind of, we don't have time for that. Anyway, I wanted to ask you, as a reporter, you're supposed to be objective. On a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the most objective, where would you put yourself?
Well, as a reporter, I'm supposed to be fair. Objectivity is a different kind of, I mean, if somebody goes over to somebody and kicks them in the face, am I supposed to get both sides of the story? I mean, if I saw the entire thing and there's no history to, I mean, I'm supposed to be fair and I'm supposed to report the facts. Some things are empirically wrong. I try to be, all I can tell you is I try to be as fair as I can. I try to come to coverage of stories not assuming that a specific side is right or wrong. Again, objectivity is just a tricky word because I think there are certain fundamental truths, like what's going, what happened in the Philippines is horrific. certain elements of justice understand. Life begins at conception. That's not for me to argue with. That's their belief. If some people believe that a woman's right to choose in their terms is fundamental, that's their belief also. But all I can tell you is I just try to be fair. And I hope I've developed a reputation for that. Now, I can tell you that there are people who think that me writing this book shows that I'm not objective, that I'm a tool of the military-industrial complex, that I'm jingoistic, that I'm fetishistic about the military. I don't think that. But I can tell you that I do think that there is a way to honor troops without believing that everything they do is holy and that the cause that they've been sent to tackle was the right one or was well executed or was the right strategy, but you can still honor them by respecting somebody who is willing to sacrifice and put themselves in harm's way. Right? Okay.
Our next question.
Does that answer your question? I'm sorry. 10. I'm a 10.
Next question to your left.
So your book was very frustrating. It was frustrating in that it was inspirational in the valor of the many people you covered. It was also very frustrating with the military bureaucracy that led to the camp.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how to resolve that, really. So my question to you is, have an opinion as to why these firings have taken place?
The truth, I don't know about, I've been reading. I heard the Benghazi thing about Carter Ham a year ago, AFRICOM. Case. I know it's him testifying. What's he going to say? I don't know is the honest truth. And I know enough not to believe everything I read on the internet. And I'm not saying you do, but I would just the details I've heard about different cases of generals or admirals being forced to resign are ones where there was inappropriate behavior. I think it's in do I think President Obama is somehow behind it? I have no evidence of that at all. I don't know that it's true or not true. I have no idea. I know that that the new Secretary of Defense, or relatively new Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, as an infantryman, might be less inclined to bow before officers than maybe previous secretaries of defense, especially ones who didn't serve. I don't know. It's a good question. I'd like to find out more about it. I'm sorry. I need to, yeah. Well, the Navy Times is a good, honestly, the Navy Times is a good newspaper. The Military Times are good papers, and if that's where you're getting your information from, I would trust that more than other sources.
I understand there's misconduct going on too, that I believe there's a lot of the 200.
We can come back to you. I think there's an
Our next question's
organized process here that I'm supposed to abide
to your
by.
right.
Your insight into how the veterans were treated when the various memorials were closed.
My insight into how the veterans were treated during the government shutdown when the memorial flights came. They had 3 flights coming that day, 3 buses of World War II and Korea veterans. And they got in fine. Maybe because we were there with our cameras, I don't know. But they got in fine. It was an honor, in fact. In a warped way, I hated that government shutdown story. It was just annoying and Washington dysfunction at its worst, but it was really cool to meet these World War II veterans who were there. And you really realize, like, some of them still very, very emotional, as if these men of theirs who had been killed, who they miss, had just been killed yesterday and not, you know, in 1943. I will tell you that I live right off, there's this big park in Washington, D.C. called Rock Creek Park, and it's just a big federal park. And I live right off of it. And there are these little parking lots, so people can park and go to the park. And during the shutdown, they would haul in these huge cement abutments and just put them so that nobody could park their car there. Nobody could drive in the 10-car. Who think that way. Do I think it was, as I see all the time in the federal government, well, on page 7, call a concrete barrier so that nobody can park there, so that in case there's an incident, blah, blah, blah. Do I think that's possible? I think that's possible too. I don't know. But what I saw in terms of your question about veterans being able to get to the World War II memorial, yes, I saw them being able to get in. Expected, and again, maybe that was because we were there with our cameras, or maybe not. I don't understand the mentality of causing the government shutdown, and I don't understand the mentality of decisions that were made during the government shutdown. I would just try to report them and give the facts as I understood them, but I know people think that there was a cause as much pain as possible diktat that was issued. I just don't have any evidence of it. And there are a lot of stupid decisions made for bureaucratic reasons, so I don't know, is the truth.
Our next question's back of the room to your left.
Jake, the government, you touched on it here a minute ago, but you know, we have our folks on the right, on the right, we got our folks on the left, and we got our Tea Party folks, and the government shuts down and the debt doesn't get extended. What do we got to look forward to here in the next time that comes up?
I wish I could tell you that I thought that, you know, things were going to get better, but I don't think they are. We're probably not going to have another government shutdown. I don't think that that was considered to be a good strategy. And ultimately, I don't think Republicans got anything out of the deal. And all that they ultimately did was take 3 weeks of coverage of Obamacare's disastrous rollout off the front page, and that's now, you know, been the lead of every newspaper and magazine and TV show off and on for the last, you know, since October, since the government shutdown ended. I think that there are, you know, our government is designed in such a way so as to big sweeping changes be very difficult to make. It's not an accident that it's difficult. That's how it was designed. And I think with a combination of redistricting, so that people on the left and the right face their toughest competition in a primary as opposed to in a general election, so that they are encouraged to go to the left and go to the right as opposed to go to the middle. That makes I think Ken Cuccinelli. So, and a lot of this is because of, some of it's because of Citizens United, some of it's because of other campaign finance rulings, but in any case, I don't see it getting any better, and I don't see, I don't feel like the energy is with those who want to get things done. I mean, probably you and me could sit down and figure out some sort of debt reduction compromise that could, that had enough in it for everybody to hate, but maybe they'd hold their nose and vote for it if it was a secret ballot. But that's just not where we are right now. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm giving everybody bad news tonight. I could show you pictures of my kids.
Jake, our next question is to your right.
Hi, Jake. My name is Megan. And
Hi.
First off, I wanted to say thank you so much for speaking about this topic because my brother is a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps.
Oh, thank him for us, please.
Of course. And I think it's great that you shed some light on this, and it's something that needs to be covered, as well as I'm a broadcast major at Chapman. And where do you think that the news and the media can help out more with this in the future?
With the story. And he was at full capability, but would hire him because do about telling that story. No, I mean, maybe it will check out, maybe it won't, maybe there are other reasons, I don't know, but telling those stories is giving. You can make a difference. And please thank your brother, and good luck making first lieutenant.
Our next question here in front from our Mayor Pro Tem, Craig Young.
Jake, thank you.
Thanks for being here, Councilman.
No, thank you. You're wonderfully articulate. I have yet to read your book, but I bought it, and I'm looking forward to it. So thank you for...
I expect a book report on my desk by...
hopefully not tomorrow morning.
By next... It's 600 pages, but I know you can do it.
I think you're spot on that a large part of the problem we have in the country is failing to face the problem that we have with our sons and our daughters who have come home. I agree with the gentleman over here that said part of what we need are more people like you raising awareness. So thank you for what you're doing. I began the morning looking at I began the morning with prayer. After prayer, I began the morning looking at the Wall Street Journal front page, talked about post-traumatic syndrome and the problems that we're having. And then as I ate dinner with my wife this evening, the news highlighted I think it was a female sergeant in Long Beach who'd been homeless and was struggling trying to get a job. The question is this, and it's really more of a challenge than a question. I heard you say a couple different times that you're not a policymaker, you're a reporter. I wonder, though, that what has really made America great hasn't always come from policymaking, but what we the people have done. And so as you raise awareness, as you continue to talk about your book and talk about all the stories you've learned, could you give us 2 or 3 or maybe 4 ideas of how we as Americans can take over where maybe we don't need policy making to happen, such as hiring the vets, or what else could we do?
Hiring the vets is a really big, and they're how excellent most hiring is a big one. I think that it would be great if kids at an appropriate age, and I don't know what that would be, but certainly at least 12, learning about wars in ways that are age appropriate, and what it means that we still have 40,000 troops, U.S. troops in Afghanistan, and what does that mean, and that 2.5 million Americans served there. I think that, you know, whether it's a church or synagogue or Sikh temple or your mosque or whatever, to have people come, people who have experienced these wars, is just to listen to them and to the stories, and to make a conscious decision to keep the channel on TV when somebody is telling a story like that, or to buy the magazine that has a soldier on the cover, or to buy the newspaper that has a soldier on the cover. Because I hate to put it in crass terms, but the media, with the exception of public radio and public television, we are a commercial venture. And if the American people don't want to hear about something, that is going to affect what gets covered. Thankfully, I work at CNN, and they've been great about, you know, I didn't do the show today because I was here and up in Simi Valley, so somebody substituted, but I'd prepared 2 pieces. One of them was an interview with retired General James Jones, who was doing something with Activision about a fund to help encourage businesses to hire veterans, and then the other one was about Gold Star Kids, and a new documentary that's airing tonight on the Pentagon Channel. You know, when that kind of stuff comes on, watch it, encourage other people to watch it. When there's a magazine or a book, anything that is trying to bring attention and awareness to these issues, you know, take part in it. But most important is having these individual veterans come and work for you and talk to people in your community, and bring them into the community, I think. Thanks.
Next question.
Approximately 5 years ago, I think, President Obama was, of course, critical of Iraq War and was more good things have come from the Afghanistan war, and what are the bad things, other than, of course, the deaths?
What good is going to come out of Afghanistan? There are a lot of good Afghan people. And I went there twice to write this book. One of the times I was embedded with a unit that was close to where Combat Outpost Keating had been, although Combat Outpost Keating doesn't exist anymore. And I met a lot of these people, and they're good people, and I think that there has been important work done. I am not of the mindset that I think that there are a lot of good people there. I'll tell you, when I was embedded with the 227 Wolfhounds at Forward Operating Base Bostic in October 2011, they were convinced that the local Afghan security forces were up to the task. What they were worried about was something that is not sexy at all, but anybody in the Army knows, or anybody in the military knows, is incredibly important, and that is support. Trucks bringing them food, the trucks bringing them water, the trucks bringing them ammunition, the helicopters that can take somebody who's wounded to a hospital. Were the Afghans going to be able to do that? That was the big question. And I think that's to this day a big question. I don't think all is lost there, and I don't think it was all for naught. I don't know. Like, I think it could still work out okay. But, you know, it's a very difficult part of the world to create. I mean, Iraq, theoretically, easier place. It's an urban environment. They're much more educated. They have potable water. They have sewer systems. Afghanistan's, not all of it, but a lot of it's not like that, so I don't know. I'm worried about the support structure. I'm worried about their ability to get bullets to the Afghan security guards on the border. That's what I'm worried about.
Here's our next question to your left.
Good evening. My name is James Prather. I served with Headquarters Company 9th Marines 1968 during the Tet Offensive in Vietnam. Most people know how we were treated when we came home, and it's had a dramatic effect on a great many Vietnam veterans. And I'm very grateful for the benefit that the current veterans have and the way they're treated. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is there's a disconnection between after the vets have been, especially veterans that have been in combat, when they come home, between the veterans and the community. If the churches and other organizations could set up a connection between those veterans that come into the VA hospital systems and coming in to the military bases when they come home, to gear these guys down, set up maybe a tech. What's going on? It doesn't even have to involve a lot of time or money, just the mere fact that people care. Because that's a real difference it can make for these veterans long term. Because once the lights go out at night and you go to sleep and you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with a flashback, you need balance. And we've got guys that are serving multiple tours in combat zones. And the PTSD, which I deal with, is going to be tremendous for these veterans. And if we can, as a society, can set up a connection and a connection system to talk to these vets and show them that we care, I think it could make a difference. What do you think?
I think that's a fantastic idea. I think Text to Vet is an amazing idea. And I know that there are, informal ways that happens now, and I hear about it all the time from troops and vets that I'm friends with. I actually hear more about it from soldiers and troops doing that with widows, texting the widows of their buddies' wives, how are you, what's going on, and that sort of thing. But I think it's a great idea. It's funny, when I was in Bagram Air Base, I was embedded with this infantry unit, and then I was also embedded with the medevac team. And in the medevac team, they had all these boxes of cookies and care packages. I was on the other end of it. You go to your local church or synagogue or whatever, and people are packing them, and then I was on the other end, everybody's eating them. But it wasn't just, people weren't just, they were very excited and saying, what do you got there, and, chopping down the goodies. But they also took the letters that the kids and that the adults, in some cases, had written, and they put them on the wall. And they were there to be read over and over by people, so I know it means something. I think that you should talk to him, is what I think, and set up a Text for Vets program in this community. I think, because it's Oh, and thank you for your service, sir.
I do not have a question. My name is Loretta Strunk Mohammed. My husband is a World War II veteran. And I wanted to let you all know that in the plaza of Orange, California, every Wednesday at 6 p.m., rain or shine, it's been going on for almost 6 years, Mark Wayland of Orange heads the Wounded Warrior Project. And if you would come, you will be honored. The World War II veterans have special seating. We have a lot of Vietnam vets that come. And you have support from Jim Torres with the Disabled American Veterans, Chapter 23. He will do anything for any veteran. He works 60 to 70 hours a week with no pay. You know Jim Torres.
I'm the chairman of the Sonic Family Helping Veterans, Lodge 469 here in Little.
Great. Then
We work with the DAV that we got off the veterans.
have you been to the Plaza of Orange?
The flag drawing ceremony.
Yes. Okay, well, we'd like you to all come. It's really wonderful, and it's...
I did a flag presentation of the new Honor Veterans Commitment flag that we developed, presented it to a lady that her son was killed, I think, in Iraq some time back, and they've been shipped 40 tons to
Yeah.
troops overseas. So we presented her today the flag at the Orange train station.
We'll take our last question here.
First of all, I wanted to say that your wife was right. You did as much as anybody could do by telling the story. I can't think of any greater thing that you could have done. So when you think every day, what can we do? You should answer it by saying, I have done, using my considerable talents, everything I could do.
Well, as far as I'll go is, I'm trying.
Okay. My second comment is perhaps in terms of what's going on now in our nation's capital, you could bring those considerable talents to bear on what I think is a very worthwhile group. Out of 535 people in the United States Congress, we have a lot of them that never shut up, some of whom I agree with, some of whom I disagree with, all of whom get a vastly disproportionate amount of attention from our press. There are a lot of people who are not either yelling for confrontation or yelling for compromise, who are simply working hard for the things they believe in. And I think it was particularly apparent today when the noise about Veterans Day was so high from our politicians, everybody sort of clamoring for attention. And I think the press can play a role in the unsung heroes who are simply quietly standing up for principle.
Never do, but I mean, I agree with you that I mean, I think that you're right that on cable there is a certain gravitation towards the people who will say the most outrageous things. I don't think that we do that on my show often. I can't say that we never do it, but I don't think we do it often, and I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. Thank you.
Jake, thank you. He'll be up in our front lobby to sign your books, but before he goes, we have a very special gift for him.
Here we go.
As you all know, all of our speakers receive this. It's a "What Would Nixon Do" coffee mug. I hope you all pick one up in our museum store. We'll see you in the front lobby in just a few minutes. Thank you for coming. Thank you.